on this episode of the WildFed Podcast.
I have this idea. I'm going to go down to the Keys and I'm going to target a blacktip shark. We go out and then he starts telling me, hey, listen, this is really taboo down here now. One of the big movements going on is this idea that we should never kill any predators. And after speaking to biologists about it, I feel like taking a couple sharks a year is not an impact. As I'm bringing the fish up, I'm gaining line. I'm waiting to see some tackle come up. The snap swivel, that has broken open. If I were to let even the littlest bit of slack into the line, the shark's gone. You get into a new species that you've targeted, and then there's so much going on in the moment. Kind of robs you sometimes of taking the time to express gratitude and honor and all of that stuff. I cut off all the fins because I want to do a shark fin soup. There's no fish smell to this meat. I just patted it dry and then cooked off a piece to see how it was, and I was like, oh man, this is the best fish I've ever eaten.
Episode number 72 of the WildFed Podcast, Midwifing Sharks, a Fish Story, is brought to you by Surthrival. Right now, Surthrival's Daylight Concentrate, their naturally derived vitamin D3 K2 supplement, is buy one, get the second one for half off. And unless you've been supplementing or live in a place with ample sunlight, your vitamin D levels are at their lowest they'll be all year long. A recent Dr. Mercola article featured in the Epoch Times states, in recent weeks and months, there have been more studies demonstrating the benefits of vitamin D against COVID-19. More than 200 doctors, scientists, and leading authorities have signed an open letter calling for increased use of vitamin D in the fight against COVID-19. And an excerpt from that letter states, research shows low vitamin D levels almost certainly promote COVID-19 infections, hospitalizations, and deaths. Given its safety, we call for immediate widespread increased vitamin D intakes. Surthrival's vitamin D3 is derived from the lanolin in sheep's wool, and it's coupled with K2 derived from Japanese natto. It's the cleanest, most effective vitamin D3 you're going to find anywhere, and you can get it at surthrival.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by LearnNature'sLanguage.com. Harvesting your own food is a truly rewarding experience, but it can be really overwhelming when you're first learning. One essential but often overlooked skill is the ability to read the tracks, signs, and sounds on the landscape. Wilderness guide and mentor Chris Gilmore, who you may remember from episode 58 of this show, is a tracker, hunter, and wild forager who's taught thousands of people to read the landscape. Whether you're a hunter looking to improve your tracking skills to find more game, a forager looking to read the landscape in search of wild food or medicine, or an outdoor enthusiast who wants to see more wildlife, Nature's Language is an online course designed to heighten your awareness and increase your knowledge and skill set. WildFed listeners get 25% off the course with the coupon code WildFed25. Check out the trailer at LearnNature'sLanguage.com. Again, that's LearnNature'sLanguage.com, where the coupon code WildFed25 gets you 25% off. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed Podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Today's episode is a fish story, but it's not your typical one. I had a really unique experience on a recent fishing trip in Florida, and this episode is a conversation between me and WildFed's producer and cinematographer Grant Giuliano, where I tell that story to him. Now, before we get into the episode, I just want to give this caveat. I love sharks, and I understand the growing sentiment and movement against harvesting sharks. You'll hear more about that in this episode, but I want to make clear from the outset that before going on this trip, I spoke to a shark biologist. Actually, you can hear that conversation in episode number 64 of this show called Shark, Harpooning Great Whites for Science with Dr. Greg Skomal. And he assured me that shark populations in the United States are both strong and well managed, and that I shouldn't worry about harvesting sharks occasionally as long as I follow the rules set forth by the fisheries biologist, which of course I do and did. The real problem sharks face is abroad, in places where fisheries are unregulated or laws go unenforced, and of course in places where the barbaric practice of shark finning is still taking place. That said, this episode's about harvesting a single shark, something I won't be doing often but that I believe can be done sustainably and with respect to these animals. So with that said, enjoy this fish tale. It's not about some outsized fish or some crazy fight. Rather, it's about what happened once that fish was actually on the boat. And it's a story I'll never forget.
How you doing, Grant?
I'm doing good. How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing really good, man. How's it feel to be a cinematographer on television?
It feels great.
I love whenever
my name pops up there.
Yeah, when for listeners, I'm talking about when WildFed's an outdoor channel, and I get to see Grant not just as executive producer, but as cinematographer. I think it's a good title for your style of shooting.
Feels good.
It's better than camera guy.
Yeah, camera operator.
Camera operator.
Yeah.
Well, so I just got back from the Florida Keys, a fishing trip that I went on. Well, actually, I went on vacation, Vonnie and I.
But you don't really just go on vacation. You go on adventures.
I was thinking about our buddy Mark, who he's always saying that, like, why can't we just chill? Like, we're doing stuff. Oh, going up to visit Daniel. I'm exhausted when I get home. He's always saying stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the difference between vacation and travel, and how for me, I've always thought about it as going traveling. And so to me, that built into that's like the idea of adventure.
Yeah, it's like the difference between also being a tourist and being a traveler.
Correct.
It's like when you really immerse yourself into the place you're going, you're traveling.
Right. And when you're vacationing, it kind of implies like pina coladas and lawn chairs and laying around. And
which I'm sure there should be some of that.
I did a lot of that. I sampled many pina coladas.
That's part of the key culture.
Oh man, it's a heavy part. I mean, I'm drying out right now because day drinking is a very common phenomenon down there.
So you were in Marathon Key.
Yeah, I was in Marathon, but we flew into Key West, which is a really cool airport. I mean, just feels to me like you're flying into Bahamas or somewhere that isn't quite as developed as the United States, And down there, they call themselves the Conch Republic.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that.
The Keys, particularly, I think it's Key West, but
that's cool.
The Keys think of themselves as
cool.
You kind of like how Newfoundland doesn't really think of themselves as Canada.
Right.
They're like their own thing. And so, yeah, the Conch Republic, and there's some history to that. But, on the trip down, so I guess backing up a little bit, I did go down to vacation. We did take like a winter vacation, but I intended to do some fishing. And in particular, I had wanted to target a black tip shark. That was my reel. Ever since we did the podcast with Greg Skomal.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Greg Skomal, right?
Yeah.
I talked to him on the phone the other day. He is such an awesome guy.
He's a cool guy.
He's so cool, man.
I really enjoy talking with him.
Looks so much like the guy who looks like Nick Nolte.
No, he's way better looking than Gary Busey.
Yeah, better looking, but I mean, he does there's a Gary Busey thing going on there, for sure. If you haven't heard that episode, it's called Shark.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to it. I mean, what a cool thing to talk to a guy who's harpooned with tags, of course, not to kill, but harpooned 200 plus great whites.
To put tracking devices on.
Them, yeah. It's just really amazing. But I mean, the way he does it, taking that tuna boat technology of being out on the pulpit and throwing like a spear at great whites on the surface.
You can Google Greg Skomal. What
I do is go to YouTube and look for the Greg Skomal shark attack video where he has a great white come up under the pulpit and try to take him off it. Yeah. But anyway, I had, in that interview, I had asked him kind of point blank at the end, is it ethical for me to take a shark from time to time? Because I've been hearing this growing movement about never killing any sharks. And he said, listen, American shark populations outside of, I think he brought up one species. I think he said the dusky shark is a bit imperiled, but I don't remember exactly how it's categorized now, because there's all those levels like near threatened, whatever. But he said, that's a shark, but you can't take it anyway. But he was saying, if a shark has legal take, he said, I really believe in the fisheries biology. If they say you can take one a day, you can take one a day.
Right.
I was like, I don't want to take one a day. I want to take like one a year, And he said, well, do it. And he said, they're great eating. And he said, I'm not afraid to admit that I sometimes will kill and eat a shark.
Right.
Which I was surprised to hear that from him, And
he's a scientist.
Yeah. And also, though, you remember when we were talking to Randy Cross about bear hunting? So Randy Cross, sort of Maine's most celebrated bear biologist. And we wanted to ask him about his hunting, and he was like, I can't really talk to you about it.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, because he was like, look, it looks to people like I'm double dipping, like if I'm doing the biology work and I'm hunting, so I just don't really talk about it. So I was surprised Greg was willing to say that, because I imagine he gets a lot of pushback. Anyway, I felt after that like, hey, the only shark I'd eaten was dogfish, spiny dogfish that we harvest on the Bunny Clark. So when we go offshore here in Maine, we run into a lot of spiny dogfish. They tend to be, say, between 2 and 3 feet long. They have teeth, but not like bite you shark teeth that you're used to thinking of.
Yeah.
Small predators, little spike on their dorsal fin there that can cut you pretty good. Anyway, they're always on the boat acting like these are these throwaway fish, and they're so frustrated by them. They don't like keeping them. What they like to do is smack their head off the deck and throw them back overboard, which just started to drive me crazy. So I took some home on our last trip, and you and I ate some of those, and they were tangy, if I recall.
Yeah.
Almost like there was an acid in there, like somebody had put lemon on them already.
Yeah, it's kind of like a metallic taste almost.
But
I liked
that
it.
said, it was a good tasting fish.
Yeah.
And I know there's a fishery developing in the UK for this species for the use in fish and chips. So, which, is interesting. It used to be cod. I mean, spiny dogfish doesn't taste like cod, that's for sure. But
I wonder if they're doing anything to the dogfish before they turn them into fish and chips.
I have a feeling they might be, based on the story I'm going to tell. But anyway, but I don't really know. So anyway, other than that, I hadn't eaten shark, and I really wanted to. So I have this idea. I'm going to go down to the Keys, and I'm going to target a blacktip shark. And get down there, and for folks who've seen our iguana episode of WildFed, I've got a couple friends down there. Chris, who owns the Tackle Box in Marathon. That's one of their big, bait and tackle shops. And then my buddy Jim, Captain Jim, who taught me to iguana hunt down there. So they hadn't been seeing much of each other recently. Work had changed for them and such. And I sort of saw them independently, and I told both of them independently, hey, I'm really wanting to get a blacktip while I'm down here. And so both of them had it in their heads they're going to take me out. And I had confidence either one of them, but I would help me get one, would put me on one. But I told them independently, and then when they finally spoke, that I created a little friendly competition there. but Chris was able to take me out a little bit earlier. So, we go out, and then he starts telling me, hey, listen, like, this is really taboo down here now.
So, like, you're on the boat, and then he tells you, and you're like, oh, what?
Yeah, like, I don't realize that, because there's so much fishing down there. Actually, let me back up. I was going to say this before. On the flight down, I read a book on the history of fishing in the Keys. So, around here, Grant, if you go to one of those go to the hardware store in town, and there'll be that rack of those historical society books. Yeah. It's one of those books about
a small, 50-page book.
Yeah, exactly. And this one was written by an angler about the history of fishing in the Keys, which is a really cool story to read. Especially because Ernest Hemingway is really tied up in that. He lived in Key West and fished there. Yeah, and that whole, the Old Man and the Sea and all that stuff. All that lore comes out of that area. But anyway, initially when people went down there, a couple things really surprised me. So the mangroves, which are these shrubs that, I don't know, I guess it's a shrub, not really a tree, but made the islands pretty impenetrable. And I guess the mosquitoes made it also like a very difficult place to go. So, and at this time, people didn't have the kind of motorboats that are available today. So people had to sail. So they'd sail down there, and then they'd stay on the sailboats because they couldn't really penetrate into the islands. They were just so dense with mangroves and biting insects and stuff. And the fisheries then started to get exploited, but only inshore because they didn't have the right boats to get offshore. Now any bozo can buy a offshore boat and go and fish it. So, this fisheries hadn't been exploited yet. And so the author's talking about different species that are down there, and he'd be like, today a big one is this, but 150 years ago, a big one was this. And it seemed like every species, it was that story that they had been much bigger. I know I'm bringing up a movie that I brought up when we did our hog episode, and I talked about Princess Mononoke.
Yeah.
So after that episode, I went out and bought the DVD.
You've made a transition back.
Oh, man, I have upgraded big time. Streaming is so... 2020. DVD is 2021 for me, man.
Let's not forget about Blu-rays too.
That's actually what I did get it on Blu-ray. Actually, the edition I bought was Blu-ray and DVD.
Your Blu-ray collection.
Yeah, my collection, right? What I've realized, I live in a place with bad internet. And so streaming sometimes is a challenge. And so I bought a DVD player and I started buying Blu-rays, and for movies that I really like and for stuff that is getting canceled that you can't get anymore. So many movies that are like, where'd they go? How come there's no copies around? So anyway, I think that the technology is a little better, personally. And you own a hard freaking copy of your movie, man. It's not like it can't disappear on you, or there's no service, so you don't have the movie you own.
The worst you can do is scratch it. But
yeah, no, I agree.
That's the worst you can do.
And that's pretty bad. You got to take care of your stuff. Yeah. No, I agree. DVDs are not
you can make
for
copies
the irresponsible.
Of them too if you need to.
Ooh,
wait, whoops.
Burn them?
Whoops.
Whoa, FBI could be hearing this, buddy. Anyway.
How do we get on to that?
I get the Princess Mononoke, and we watch it. And it takes place in Japan, I don't know, 600 years ago or something like that. And the concept is that humans are like cutting down the forests and exploiting the resources. And as they do, these big animals that are gods are being killed off. And so there's, in the film, what had got me onto it was this really massive hog, and he's in charge of all of these hogs, the boars really. And they kill the kind of boar god, and they kill a wolf god,
which represents all of those animals.
Well, what's happening in the film is as those gods are killed off and as more of the forest is taken, the animals are losing their ability to communicate with people, and they're becoming stupid.
Wow.
So the idea would be like, today hogs can't speak to us. Today hogs are kind of like a inferior intelligence to us. But then before humans had kind of taken over the environment, that's the mythology of it, that they weren't like that we could commune with them. So it's just a neat story about preserving nature and whatnot. But anyway, as I read more and more about the Keys, I was like, man, it's like what's happened, So now you're like, this is a big fish. And it's like, well, it's a big fish today, but it would have been a lot bigger in the past.
I've heard you say a similar thing with populations of individual fish or animals too, specifically fish, like back in the day, or what we think of as baseline now was not baseline.
Correct. Yeah.
Way back then.
And it's true of, obviously it's true of a lot of things. It's really true of birds as well, where you'd have these just, the passenger pigeon being the ultimate story.
That's crazy. You said it would darken the sky for days over a town because of the flock was so large.
It could that they'd come over your town and for a day or 2 days or 3 days, and then they would nest too. And so you would have these just massive, nesting areas.
They'd be shooting like cannons up into the sky.
Man, from what I read sometimes is they would pack cannons with just like anything, broken glass, nails, refuse, shells, just be blasting these birds out of the sky. Ultimately, I think with them what ended up happening was people assume like, hey, as long as there's a few hundred of them, they can restart. And it turns out with that particular species, you need millions for them to be a sustainable population. But anyway, getting off track. So going down there, I want to harvest a shark. I'm aware as I'm going down there that I'm a participant in the exploitation of the fisheries, of course. But so I guess a big part of this for me is like the tragedy of the commons thing, where it's like I don't feel like I'm the one doing that, but I've certainly thrown my hat in too, right? So, whatever. But I have it in my head that I would like to take a shark every year, and add something else besides the pollock and haddock and, a few other freshwater fish and whatever that I eat every year. So, so we're going on the boat, and Chris now has, since you were last down there, he's started a charter business. So he's got 2 boats, beautiful setup.
What's he calling it?
I think it's the Tackle Box.
Cool.
I'm pretty sure it's under the same name as his shop. And Harris, who's like a young man now, how like you don't see a kid for a little while, and then you see him, he's got little like shady mustache coming in, all that stuff. It's like a little man now. He's got a boat too, a little they call it a bully boat.
How old is he? He must be. Is he almost 18 now? Like he was probably like 15 when we.
17. I don't know. He's probably about 16.
He's a cool little dude.
Well, he's not a little dude now. But he got a little bully boat, which is like picture a skiff that you steer from right up in the bow, and it's got lights that point down. It's for like lobstering and stuff, right?
Cool.
Down there for those crawfish, what they call lobsters. And he's like got a little dive business developing and stuff. So they got a cool operation. So if anybody's listening to this and you're going to go down to the Keys to fish, hit up Chris at the Tackle Box. He's a good friend. So anyway, we're heading out on the boat, and he's like, yeah, listen, like we can't people lose their minds about this. Like, he's like, would not normally kill a shark. You know, I really believe in what you do, and I respect how you do it. I know you're going to eat it, but like, you know, basically, like, we can't be showing this shark off. Because sometimes, like, you come back with a big mahi, and as you're pulling into the harbor, you're holding it up, and all the people in the bars and restaurants are like waving and whistling, and it's not a fish you do that with now, a shark, you know. So, okay, so we go out and we start setting up, you know, lines, and we're floating bait on balloons, you know, using balloons like bobbers kind of.
Yeah, okay.
And we hook into a couple fish and lose them, blah, blah, blah. But eventually we get one on, and I just know, man, I know this is the fish. I can just, if everything is like feeling right. So I've got like a bent butt rod, you know, like that's made to sit in the rod holder. And but I've got that, you know, stand up, and I'm running around the boat because it's center console, and you know, everybody's kind of shouting. It's, you know how it is when you've got a big fish on. You've seen this where it's like,
so fish gets on, you take it out of the holder.
Yeah, it comes out of the rod holder. Yeah, and a big conventional reel. Because we had a couple rods going. We had some that were spinning. I prefer fishing with a spinning rod when I can. This was a bigger, heavier rod, but anyway, he hands it to me, and I'm kind of running around the boat, and everybody's, you know, the whole focus becomes on that one rod and what's happening there, right? So as I'm bringing the fish up, you know, it's a pretty long fight, a good fight because it's a strong fish, and I start to, you know, gain line. And as I'm gaining line, I'm waiting to see some tackle come up. So I know where, you know, once I see the snap swivel, then I know I'm at my leader, which I don't know how long the leader was. Let's say it's 10 feet long or something, but I'll know kind of where I'm at. So as the tackle starts coming out, I see the main line is, the braid is tied to a snap swivel, which is tied off to which is, you know, clipped onto a leader. Well, that snap swivel, which is basically, if you're listening to this and you're not familiar, the snap swivel is like a piece of wire that grabs onto the eyelet of a swivel, wraps back 180 degrees, and clips on itself, on the shaft of itself. It makes it easy to change leaders without having to tie knots every time. So that has broken open. You know, it's a 350-pound test snap swivel. It is bent completely open. So rather than being 180, it's now straightened out.
It's like at the very end, too, based on the picture you showed.
Yeah, there's a little hook that is made to clip around the shaft of itself. That clip now, that little, I don't know how to describe it, it's like a little tiny hook, is holding the swivel. And that's the only thing connecting me to this fish now. So if I were to let even the littlest bit of slack into the line, the shark's gone, you know? So it comes up, and I yell for them to come look, and now everybody's like bugging out, like, oh man, we don't want to, you know, you don't want to lose the fish you've worked for. This is the target we've been after.
You don't want to
also
fish down there with gear in its mouth.
You don't, yeah, that's the big thing, is you just don't want this fish swimming off with gear in its mouth. And then as I bring the fish to the surface, I see that because, you know, at first you just get that little bit of color, and then everybody's like, oh my God, and then it's like, it's a blacktip, and then I see the size. I'm like, this is the fish I've had in my mind.
Yeah,
exactly so cool. The right size. This is exactly what I've been wanting. And I realized that its stomach is basically pulled out of its mouth, because that's what it's hooked into. Like, it had swallowed the bait, and then in the fight, that hook had set in the stomach of the fish, and now it's yanked out of the mouth in such a way that you're like, if we lose this fish, it's going to die.
Yeah.
So now the pressure's really on, because this is the fish I want. The tackle's ready to let go. If I lose the fish, it's going to die. These guys already feel guilty about the fish dying anyway. But if we kill it and lose it, I mean, so much worse, you know?
Yeah.
So tensions are pretty high for a minute. As I recall, I have to bring the fish all the way over, because at this point, I'm on the starboard side, and then I end up coming around the bow to maybe I go around the stern, and now I'm on the port side.
Okay.
And they are able to get a gaff in the fish. We lift it up to the gunnels, and the plan was I would shoot it, because we didn't want to bring, you know, this big, heavy, thrashing, you know, just set of jaws onto the boat with all the people there. Yeah. So I have that Glock 43X that I've been carrying around, and I put one into the mouth through the back of the head, and the fish just goes not limp, but like into nervous system convulsion stuff, like where it's just Like its body's moving, but you can tell its lights are out.
Did it do that thing where like when you whack a fish over the head and it kind of like...
when the gills open and it straightens out? No, it didn't. It did this other thing it did this serpentine motion over and over again. Like as if you put it in the water, it would swim a little bit, but it wasn't consciously at the helm of itself. It was lights out.
Just muscle memory.
Yeah. So, and then it kind of does go limp, and we bring the shark over into the boat. And I'm looking at the shark like, I mean, the whole moment was really intense, And so now it's like, we're there, and I'm looking at her, and it's like, I'm just, wow, she's beautiful, exactly like what I had pictured. And I'm having that thing, because you've seen this a lot too, where you get into a new species that you've targeted, and then there's so much going on in the moment that you don't often, like when you got your hogs recently, and you went over to spend some time with it, but then the commotion of all the other hunters and everything going on kind of robs you sometimes of the moment that you want to spend with the animal the first time. Because if it was just you alone, right, you'd be there like, like praying and singing and dancing in a circle around it or something, and like taking the time to express gratitude and honor and all of that stuff. But then it's like you're on a boat with a bunch of dudes and all this noise is going on and the gun just went off and stuff. So it's kind of a little intense. But I'm looking down and I'm thinking, wow, she's fat. She's making me think of when I see a big, like a heavy white shark that's all like big in the shoulders, like thick in the belly. And I pictured her being more streamlined than this, Anyway, I go to pick her up because it's like photo time and all that. And she weighs like, well, you've seen the video of me picking her up, right? I showed you that.
You showed me a picture.
Okay, so let me give a little backstory to you listeners. When I came home, Grant had my dog, and thank you again for that.
No, it's a pleasure to have her.
Grant often takes my dog when I go traveling or vacationing. And I went to pick up Ellie, and Grant and Kendall had some guests in town.
Alec and Jenny.
So all four of them are at the house with the dogs, and I come over, and they ask me about my fishing trip, and I start telling them, but I go, look, I don't want to tell Grant the whole story about this shark because there's a component of the story that I want to save. So I showed pictures, and I told the story, and then when I got to a certain part, which we're about to reach, I made Grant put his fingers in his ear and go like, la, 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 while I told the story.
I got to see everybody's reaction.
Kendall, Alec, and Jenny. And then, everybody's kind of like, oh, wow. And Grant's like, still doesn't know the story. So I wanted him to hear it authentically for the first time on the podcast. But I did show you, there was a little video of me picking the shark up. I think it must have weighed about 75 pounds is my guess. Because I sort of struggle, like I'm red in the face lifting it up. It's probably about 5 feet long, 5.5 feet long or something. And, I set her back down on the deck, and then it's like, well, put her on ice. And I go like, I don't know, guys. Everything I read says if you really want best meat quality, to gut the shark right away because of the way they push urine through their meat and skin. If you leave the guts in, you get more of that. I don't know if that's true. When I try to find out about this stuff, I don't seem to find anything definitive. So if somebody listening knows more, please let me know, write me. But from what I read, it seemed like gut the fish. And that seems like a good practice.
Why not?
Anyway, so they're kind of like, are you sure you want to do that right now? Because we're going to keep fishing. We're going to go now target snappers and stuff. So for, regular table fare stuff. So I'm like, guys, if you don't mind, I'd like to walk this whole thing out. Chris is like, well, do your thing, man. No problem. I'll get you a bucket, So thankfully, I decide I'm going to gut the fish. So I find her vent, and I open her up to the chin. And you know how how the guts just sort of slide out sometimes? What slides out are her 2 uteri. Because, this shark has not 1 uterus, but 2.
Oh.
So these 2 uteri slide out, and I'm looking at what I've looked at in deer before when I've had to clean a pregnant doe. Like when we've had roadkill doe that are pregnant.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's pups in these uteri.
Wow.
And like a lot of them. And I'm like, guys... And everybody kind of looks around. And then the moment goes real somber for a second. Because it's like, oh, we didn't just kill the one shark. It looks like we killed a whole bunch of sharks, So, don't know yet, right? There's like a membrane. I can see shark outlines inside.
Whoa.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment. But first, Episode 10 of the WildFed TV show, our season 1 finale all about ice fishing, chaga harvesting, and the biggest plant we forage all year, our Christmas tree, aired this week, Monday, March 8th on the Outdoor Channel, and of course, they'll be rerunning it all week. And starting next week on Monday at 7 p.m. East, they'll be replaying the entire season. So if you've missed any episodes, now's your chance to catch up. If you're like me and you don't have cable, you can stream WildFed from the app Friendly TV. That's FRNDLYTV.com. It's the word friendly without vowels. There, you can watch episodes on the Outdoor Channel as they air or stream them on demand until July 1st. It's less than $7 a month, and there's a free 1-week trial, so you can get Friendly TV for a week and binge watch all 10 episodes of WildFed at no cost to you. Here at WildFed, we want to thank you for an incredible first season, and we hope you'll keep following the journey on our social media and in our twice-a-month newsletter, The Subsistence, which you can sign up for at wild-fed.com. Now, back to the show.
So everybody's like, oh man, here we go, So I'm cutting in. So I open up the first one and I pull out a baby shark. It's probably 20 inches maybe.
That big?
Fully formed. Eyes looking at me, thrashing around like it'll bite me.
Wow.
So I cut the umbilical cord and I put it in the water and it just darts off.
Whoa.
Gone. We're all like, whoa, keep doing it. So I take out another one. And the first one there's a video of it. I didn't show it to you yet, but the first one I kind of lob it into the water because I'm worried it's going to swing around and take a chunk out of me,
Yeah.
So I kind of toss it into the water, but then I kind of get okay, relax, dude. I take out the second one, cut the umbilical cord, goes into the sea. They're all different sizes. And one uteri has 3 and the other uteri has 4. The one that had 3 had one exceptionally large one.
Ate some other ones?
Maybe there might have been 8 originally, But they were very healthy. So all of them swam off. I got to midwife. I was like, guys, from now on,
I'm the nurse shark.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that. At all. It's good. But they were like, shark killer. I was like, no, shark birther.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah,
dude.
So what happens next is Chris starts getting kind of emotional, right?
Really?
Because this dude, Webb, is videoing it with a GoPro,
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm just busy cleaning them and stuff. And he's like, Chris, tell me about what's happening. And Chris just starts going Chris is like a former cop, He's not a guy. He's not a man of he's not loquacious, He doesn't go on and on. He's not new agey at all. But boy, he starts going man, the cycle of birth and death, and one thing dies, but all these things are born. It starts getting I'm like, wow, I'm getting tingly,
Yeah.
He's getting all, it's emotional. People just saw life happen at the same time they saw death happen. So it was really, really inspiring, And we got some footage of the GoPro in the water when I released one of the sharks, and you see, I've got a great photo. They're actually printing.
Maybe we can post that video.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to by the time this comes out. They're printing a large format picture of one of these pups underwater because its eye is so clear and open.
Really?
I mean, it's really, really cool. Yeah.
What was I going to say? I mean, 20 inches is a size fish that people would keep with a lot of species,
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what's weird about fish in general, because you'll be like, that's a small one, but it's 10 times the size of something that you'd. It's like when we did our brook trout episode.
6 inches.
6-inch fish, and we're like, this is a good one. Yeah. You get an 8-incher, you're like, it's huge. Right?
Yeah.
So it depends so much on what the species is. But so then I start thinking were these pups really ready? Are they going to make it? And I don't know enough about sharks. I bought a book today, actually.
Is that why you were talking to Greg?
Yeah, that's why I called him. So, but I'll give you a little more story first, and then I'll talk about that. But so we pack this fish on ice and with ice, put her down in the fish box, and we go off to another reef to just do some snapper fishing. And Webb just keeps hooking up with baby blacktip sharks, one after the other. And we're going, and this is a different spot, so they're not these ones I just released.
Same size, though? Ish?
Yeah, all in the same size range.
When you say 20 inches long, how, what's the rest of the body looking like? Is it something you could...
It looks like if you took the shark that I got and just scaled it down.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Yeah, exactly. The waist to length ratio about the same, except this fish was pregnant. So obviously she was a little bit, like she weighed 75 pounds when I picked her up, but probably 10 pounds of that was these maybe more. There wasn't a lot of water or any fluid or anything in there though. But anyway, he keeps hooking up with these baby sharks. And so we start going, well, that's a good sign. Maybe they were ready. Maybe she was just getting ready to let them go because there's a whole bunch of baby blacktips in the water. But I was like, oh man, I get so nervous about doing fisherman science, where it's like, they go like, that's proof. I was like, oh, that's an anecdote. Let's find out.
That's making us feel better.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so yesterday I call Greg and I just said, hey, this is what happened. And he's like, cool story.
He's so enthusiastic.
Yeah, he really is, man. He's awesome. But I was like, do you think these sharks would have survived? I was like, Mom doesn't I know she's not like petting them on the head and packing them school lunches, but I was like, do sharks do anything for their young? He's like, no. He's like, if they hang around long enough, she might eat them. And he's like, if they were ready to go, then they're fine. And I said,
swam off.
Yeah, and I said, oh yeah, they were. I mean, they not just swam off, but like the second they were in the water, they were gone. Like they weren't like around the boat, like trying to figure out what to do. They took off like with purpose. So I said, yeah, we caught a bunch of other small black, because he was like, I'll look it up and see what time of year they birth down there, because it's different depending on where they are. And I said, we caught all these pups, and he's like, oh, that's a really good sign. He's like, those fish are probably fine. Now the thing is the one other thing I was reading was that the survival rate for a litter isn't that good. So you're not all of them probably went on to live,
right?
But if one or two did, that's normal. So anyway, it was a pretty cool story, getting to kind of
it's amazing,
give birth to.
It's really cool.
I did a cesarean section basically, and
it's cool to me because like you had a lot of intent on that. This is the size blacktip I want. Like you seem to have a lot of good juju when it comes to this kind of thing. Like you visualize the fish that you want, you get it, and you're like, guys, I don't know. I think we should gut this fish. It's like I think not to get too woo, but it speaks a lot to intuition, I think.
Yeah. And all my little weird ceremonies and voodoo that I do. So I did all that stuff, of course. But a big part of it was I was really worried about the urea thing. When we got back, okay, so then what happens next is we finish up for the day and we're going to head back to the docks, except, Chris's wife is like, they were talking on the phone and she's like, don't go back to the dock with that shark. Like you're going to, because he's a fixture of the island, right? It's like, people are going to see him with this shark and think like, oh, he's whatever. So we go back to his house because he's got a spot on the water. And when I take that shark out of the fish hole, it's got this greenish yellow tint that's overcome its skin. And it smells like dank urine. Real bad. Like super concentrated, stinky urine. And it's not the most appetizing
that really
smell, right? So exactly. So
whenever I pee after a long night of not drinking water, I get hungry.
Yeah, that smell makes me hungry. So I take it over to his fish cutting table, and I also have to like intuit how to do this. Like I do with most new species, I a lot of YouTube and stuff like that. But ultimately, I just kind of had to figure it out. So I cut off all the fins because I want to do a shark fin soup. Which is funny because I think some people will hear that and be offended. Yeah, I already have the shark fin.
Let's just clarify. The bad part about shark fin soup is that you just take the fins.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's funny, like, you should get rid of those fins. Do not make shark fin soup. But I cut the fins off, and the fins have a really interesting texture inside them. You and I filleted a stingray together. You remember that sort of strange noodly texture inside them? That's kind of how the fins are. So
people pretend those stingray wings are scallops. I've heard punch meat out of them.
Right. Yeah. You can see why. It's good for. That was like one of my favorite fish.
It's really good.
Yeah, sharks and stingrays are really good. Anyway, stingrays though, we didn't have that issue with that urea issue. So because stingrays are sharks.
They are? They're all,
or at least they're all in the same.
cartilaginous.
Yeah, they're all cartilaginous fish. But like a stingray, as I understand it, it's pretty much a flattened out shark. So anyway, I'll know more soon. For the people who are getting frustrated with me winging it biology. So as I get into another thing I had read was like, don't fillet this thing right to the skin the way you would. You know, when you're trying to run your fillet knife right along the skin and trying to maximize meat, they were like, give it a centimeter and stay off of the skin, because right along the skin, you know, you get a lot of that red, fishy muscle meat. So take all this meat off, and it is a very strange thing in that all the meat just seems to be like uniform. It's not like different muscles like a mammal, of course, but it's also not different quality of meat the way a fish is on different parts of its body. There's no fat stores or anything like that. It's just all like this huge sheath of this beautiful white meat. So I take all that off, and man, it smells terrible. And I almost don't want anyone to come over there and smell it, because I'm like, they're going to all, I don't want people start putting negative things in my head. So I just quickly get it all in a cooler, put the fins in the cooler, and I took the jaw out. I wanted that too. So, man, I have this very few memories of my father, you know, but when I was a kid, we went and visited him once at Baltimore. And so the few memories I have of him are super formative, because he was such a small part of my life that I really like hung on to the memories that I had. And one, because he's a paleontologist and a biologist, he had a shark jaw about the same size as this one. And I remember being like, thinking it was so cool as a little kid, you know? So I was like, I'm keeping that jaw. So I put that in the cooler. Long story short, I end up, I wrap all that meat up in cellophane, freeze it in Jim's freezer, pack it in my carry-on Yeti bag, bring it home with me.
It's not green at this point.
No, the meat was never green.
The green was around the skin outside.
It's like, you know, when you're like, ooh, that person's looking sick, they're a little green. Yeah. They're not actually green, but like there's like that hue that you see. And you know how like if you kill a fish very often, like let's say a brook trout's a good example, a mahi's a really good example. They come out of the water so brilliantly colored, and then like you look at them in an hour and all that color is like drained out of them. Right. It was like that, but there was this just sort of pea yellowy, biley green hue over it, you know? Yeah. Anyway, even frozen, I'm packing the meat into my Yeti, and it just smells like pea. You know, even frozen. Yeah. I'm like, this is gonna, man, I'm like, did I do something wrong? Anyway, I had read about soaking the meat when you get home, but I don't know, I was just worried about it. Anyway, we go through the security check. That was cool. The lady was, I think, fished, because she totally got it. She apologized profusely. I'm so sorry I have to take this stuff out of your bag. Blah, blah, blah. I was worried they were going to see shark fins and think I was, you know, illegally.
Some black market dealer.
Black market fin dealer or something. But anyway, get the fish onto the plane, get it home. And I had read a bunch, like if you're going to try to soak the fish, and I've read several things can be used. Lemon juice. Tony Seachrist told me that baking soda works. Yep. But I read buttermilk works and I read milk works. Mm-hmm. But I liked the idea of milk the most because it's the least reactive. Like the idea of uric acid and baking soda sounds to me a bit like a science experiment for making a volcano. You know? Yeah. And I didn't like that. And buttermilk is acidic. And lemon juice is so acidic you're going to cook the meat, it seems like.
Yeah,
so,
like maybe impart lemon flavor.
Right, exactly. And I think it would be good if you planned to do a ceviche or something like that. But for what I wanted, I decided to go with milk. So I go get some like local milk, and I do this. I cut all the meat into steaks and cubes, and then I soak it all in clear tubs for a day overnight.
In the fridge?
In the fridge. And the next day, just only put it, just to keep it cold. Mm. But I don't know that affects the reaction at all. Yeah. But anyway, the next day I go pull a piece of meat out of that milk, and it looks and smells perfect. No smell.
You just like pat it dry?
I just patted it dry and then cooked off a piece to see how it was. And I was like, oh man, this is the best fish I've ever eaten. What's neat about shark meat is again, just as I understand it, and I could be wrong here, but I believe sharks are storing their body fat in their liver. That's why their liver is so highly sought after. And, if you look at predators of the great white, there aren't many besides people. It's mostly orcas. And they'll kill a great white and very artfully, almost like what do you call it? A necropsy. That's like an autopsy on an animal.
Okay.
It's almost like a necropsy. They just remove the liver and very little.
They flip them upside down and
take that liver right out. Yeah. And so that liver's so packed with oil. And also I had read blacktip, which I guess for listeners too, I should say, the reason I was targeting a blacktip is because they are considered amongst the best eating sharks in the world. So
okay. I have to, what my question's going to be right now. Did you take the liver?
I did not take the liver. I did not. But I read that the liver is used to make commercial fish oils.
Oh.
Yeah. So it wasn't the kind of liver that I didn't get the impression looking at this liver like you'd want to eat it.
Yeah.
But it can be used to make fish oils, and it's a desirable food for the ecosystem. So
okay.
We put that back. But
that's cool.
So because a shark stores its oil in its liver, they don't store it as much in the meat. And they definitely don't store it in the belly the way a lot of fish do. So there's no fish smell to this meat. There's no fish taste. It's a texture where it's a seafood.
Almost not.
Yeah,
even.
So I cooked you
firm.
some. Yeah, how would you describe it?
I was describing it like a mix between swordfish and chicken. Not in flavor, but in texture and look. Like when I saw it raw, I was like, oh, it's a little swordfishy.
In the steaks.
In the steaks, but it's tighter grain.
Yeah.
It's not like flaky like swordfish.
But where swordfish is made of all those striations, in that way it's similar to swordfish, right? But then in flavor and texture, I got a lot of like chicken breast type of very mild, really nice chew, but like no fishiness to it. Yeah, where swordfish is very fishy, of course.
You could convince me that if you gave it to me and didn't tell me it was shark or fish, I would believe you. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would believe it was chicken. Yeah. I'd be like, "What's up with this chicken?"
Yeah, exactly.
But I'd be like, "What is this?"
Purdue just engineered these.
But it's very interesting and it was delicious.
Yeah, one of my.
I'd like to try it unseasoned too.
Yeah, because I did it blackened.
I'm gonna need more. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm finna give it all away, bud.
Fin.
Putting the fin and finna give it away. I did get quite a lot of meat off it. I didn't get to weigh it, but I packed my Yeti as tight as I could, and then I had to actually leave some odds and ends bits around. Unfortunately, I didn't get it all back, but I probably left like 1 pound of meat that I couldn't fit. But anyway, I will cook some for you like that. The meat's so good, and when Avani ate it, and she came to it with a couple of things. Like one was me saying, "Baby, don't smell this meat. I don't want you to come anywhere near it until it's ready." Because I was like, if she smells it smelling like pee, she's never gonna. Mm-hmm. And I can't blame her. I'm like the food experimenter in the relationship. Yeah. So to me, it's like, oh, yeah, it smells like pee now, but if it doesn't later, who cares? So I didn't want her to smell it, but obviously she had heard me and knew what I was dealing with. So that's like a strike against it already. Mm-hmm. Then there's all the talk about mercury in sharks, right? Because sharks are, apex predators, and so they are bioaccumulating up the food chain. So there's like that whole issue of them concentrating through the food web mercury that's in smaller fish. I'm kind of on the camp of I want to believe that the selenium levels in fish counteract the mercury in fish.
Yeah.
For a couple reasons. One is because despite all the stories of how bad the mercury is in fish, you look at places where they're eating they're subsisting on wild fish, and you don't see the large scale mercury poisoning that you would expect there to be. So it seems like
running around like the Mad Hatter.
Right. Not many anyway. And it seems like from what I read, that you don't really start to get damage from mercury until your selenium levels are depleted.
Right.
And the selenium levels in ocean fishes are high, so they're sort of counteracting the mercury.
And when you talk about something like a chelating agent, what is that doing?
That's binding to it in the digestive system, and then you never actually absorb it.
So if you are worried about it, you can eat some things
correct
with that meal.
Chlorella, cilantro. Do you like how I said that?
Cilantro.
Cilantro.
That's what I was gonna say. We should try some ceviche out of the shark.
I need to double check. I need to make sure we can. But yeah. Also, I wonder if coriander, because coriander is cilantro seed, right? So I wonder if coriander works as well. To a lesser degree, pectins, like what you'd have in strawberry or something like that, where you have fruit pectins. Arthur Haynes, he's always eating chlorella with just about everything because they're like, chelates, and that's it's like their anti-kryptonite agent or whatever.
I remember he was like, that's the one thing I'll buy industrially.
And we ate a bunch of chlorella with it that night. I'm kind of bad about it, actually. You were the one who was like, should we do that?
Ivani and I ate it, and you were like, I'm not eating that.
I swallowed them.
Yeah, you took it like pills. I was like,
yeah, you're chewing them. Looking
I kind of like it in a weird way.
Oscar the Grouch mouth. Chlorella is a microalgae, that's used as a nutritional supplement. And one of the great things about it, besides its nutrition, is its ability to chelate heavy metals. But you need to kind of eat it with or after the meal.
It's not going to take it. It's not going to take it out of your body. It's going to take it out of the food that's in your digestive system.
Yeah, it's going to make sure it doesn't get absorbed in the digestive system. So so the idea of the mercury is also working against this, right? So there's the pea smell, the mercury thing, and just the weirdness. It's a shark. And Avani's brother is, and her father was too, big scuba diving people. And I had to convince her brother that this was good,
Because this was okay to do, you mean?
Yeah, like I remember when I talked to him about killing that stingray that we ate, and he was like, "Oh, I don't really like that." He goes all over the world, I believe he's gone to like Galapagos and everything. Like he's a big diver. Yeah. And so for him, for divers, like the idea of killing, there's certain species that, he's a fisherman too, but there's certain species for him, that's where a lot of the stuff about not killing sharks is coming out of, the people who see themselves, I think it really is like reef stewards, So anyway, so there's all these things like kind of working against it. So it's like, how is she going to like this meat? And then like she takes like a couple bites. She goes, "Can this be my new favorite?"
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. So to me, if you like it, that doesn't tell me much because you and I
like some weird stuff.
Yeah, we like some weird stuff. But if she likes it, I know I'm in. So now I'm ready to like do a shark party. Because I mean,
I could have just kept eating it though.
I had yesterday.
It felt like my body wanted it. It must be packed with protein.
I mean, it's like all protein. Yeah, because it's very lean.
Yeah,
I know. I ate at lunch yesterday about as much as I served the three of us the other night because I had it all. I had a bunch left.
A pound.
Yeah, like 4 playing card decks worth or so.
That's awesome.
Because I had it in the fridge and I was like, oh, I don't want this to go bad. And I just thawed some of that boar that we got. So I was like, if I don't eat this now, it's not going to get eaten. So I ate it all at lunch. And it was one of those things like 20 minutes later, I felt like I wasn't full.
Yeah.
I just felt...
It's like when you have sushi.
Yeah, exactly. I felt great, except it was cooked, Yeah. So anyway, the meat's amazing. So I'm really impressed. And now I see myself wanting to explore the shark fishery up here.
What do you see for... Like, what would you like to do culinarily with that shark? Any ideas that you want to try out?
Yeah, I need to do some research and make sure. I assume ceviche is safe. It's a fish. I don't see why it wouldn't, but I want to double check. But I would love to do it.
Be a good fish for ceviche.
Yeah, what I really want to do is kebabs on the grill.
Yeah.
So I did cube a lot of it, and I'm just thinking of like getting a little bit, some sort of little scorched on the outside, with some vegetables, blackening a little bit of like peppers and mushrooms and tomatoes and stuff like that. So I'd like to do it like that as well. And then I think some in tacos would be fun because maybe in that blackened style or something. But man, just as steaks, I'd like to explore, doing more stuff just as steaks, and particularly like you said, without necessarily flavoring it so much too, and just kind of having it straight up because it's so nice. But now that I'm a shark midwife, but I am interested in because up here I'm reading that the short fin makos up here are not as prolific now, and they might not be doing as well. But they're here, and there is take allowed on them. The thresher is one I'm really interested in, and that's for folks.
Cool looking shark that you showed me the other night.
Yeah, so its caudal fin, the top portion of its caudal fin is
It's like double or
No,
three
I'd
size.
say it's like 5 times longer than it would
the
be on
bottom
any other
part?
shark. Yeah, like when you see
I mean, the size.
Oh, then the bottom part of the fin.
Right.
Yeah, multiple times longer. Yeah, and evidently it uses it as a whip to stun prey.
a sassy little shark.
It is a sassy shark. It's got a bullwhip. Yeah, so that's what I'm interested in. If I hooked into a great white and brought it to the boat, I wouldn't be like wicked upset about that, you know? Like I wouldn't be bummed that I had that experience.
It happens, right?
Oh yeah, of course. I don't think you can, they're more near shore, so I don't know if
Obviously, they're protected. Well, not obviously, but they are a protected shark.
right. Yeah,
But
you,
are they?
You wouldn't be able to take it out of the water, but you wouldn't want to take it out of the water.
Are they endangered? Are they? Why are they protected? Do you know?
Let's look that up real quick. I don't know if they have endangered species. The problem is we use these terms like kind of loosely all the time, right? So, endangered's like an actual thing. So let me just check on their status. Okay, so it says here they're listed on the Endangered Species Act as vulnerable. It's illegal to... So take of white sharks is illegal. Take is defined as hunt, pursue, catch, capture, or kill, or attempting to hunt, pursue, catch, capture, or kill. So as I understand it up here, what happens is when you're shark fishing, you can end up catching one, but it's not what you're there to catch, right? So it's sort of like when you're trapping, you may get an animal a bycatch that you did not intend to. That's not illegal, but you can't keep that animal, obviously. So I'm just saying if I ended up having to bring one to the boat, bigger for me though would be, just to go with Greg and get to stand on one of those pulpits with a tag and do a little harpooning for science would be preferable.
I'm trying to figure out a way to legally eat one.
You and Greg will have to talk at the docks, man. But also there's the blues up here, which are one of our most common sharks. I think probably most common after the dogfish. I was reading about that too. People were saying it's kind of like the story with mackerel. They're softer, they're less desirable, but they can be eaten.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, they are pretty, huh?
Yeah.
They call them blue dogs up here a lot. But anyway, yes, we've got a few desirable shark species here. But I've got a kind of an inshore boat, so I've got a little research to do. But I'm excited about the fishery. Though at the same time, I think it's the idea of harvesting a shark is going to get less and less popular. But just to go back to what Greg was saying, he was like, Daniel, in the United States, we manage sharks really well. And outside of the United States, it's not just finning. Finning's like the horrible practice that people hear about, and that's the stuff that really like tugs at the heartstrings so that,
Understandably so. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's friggin' horrible. We hear more about it, though, is what I mean, than the fact that a lot of sharks are just being taken for food. So a lot of the world is subsisting on shark, or like as part of their subsistence. And he said that's probably taking more sharks than finning is taking. He said that how many sharks are lost to finning is not quite as much as how many are lost to food.
Oh, really?
Around the world. In unregulated fisheries. But in the United States, where we have regulated fisheries, we don't have the problem. But it's kind of like so many of the things in the United States where it'll be like, well, we're expected to set the example on things. You know what I mean? So it'll be like, well, this country's polluting like this, and this country's polluting like that. And they're like, but we're supposed to be the example. So in that way, I think is why shark fishing now is starting to be frowned upon here, not because we're having any problems with these sharks here.
What would you say to somebody that, like, you bring a shark back to the docks and somebody starts berating you?
Yeah.
What's your response?
Well, what's their attitude like?
Like, how could you do that? How could you kill that shark? It's beautiful. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's their reasoning? Why do they say you can't do it? Like, what would people? I wonder what people would.
This is like come up for me in so many different places, right? Because we've talked a lot about whales. We obviously amongst, when we talk about bear hunting, it comes up all the time. It's neat how there's animals where it's like no one's really gets worked up about hogs. You notice that? Like nobody's ever been like, you should not kill those boars. It's like if people are like, well, they're kind of gross.
Even deer. I mean, people get emotionally affected by killing deer because they're so beautiful and cute. But I mean, in Maine, like if you see a hunter if anybody sees a hunter going out to the woods, like, oh, it's deer hunting season. It's just accepted.
So I think deer are seen as a prey animal, and bears are seen as a predator. And so one of the big movements going on is this idea that we should never kill any predators. And I think a big part of that is because there was predator eradication programs funded by the United States government for a really long time. You know, eradication of wolves, eradication of coyotes, and full eradication programs, right? Bears, big cats, puma, alligators, sharks, like this idea that we got to like kill off all the predators. So now there's a big movement to try to counterbalance that are pointing out, like I just bought this book on sharks today. It is so anti-fishing. You know, it's just like all I did was just flip through it. I was like, I'm just gonna have to swallow it in order to read the book because I want the facts from the book, but it's got an agenda for sure. And so what a lot of it is people now pointing out the importance that apex predators play in the ecosystem, how important they are to the overall ecology, which I totally agree with. You know, like I definitely don't believe in eradicating any species. But I think that's a big part of why somebody would be upset is because it's a predator. And so they'll say things like, why would you need to take a predator when there's so many other things you can eat? You know, that's like one of the things I hear a lot.
So it's like the people who are upset about it are educated?
Well, that's like one class of people who get upset about it. Because, like a lot of people who have, you know, academic backgrounds are inculcated in a sort of anti-hunting mentality, you know? So I think that that's a big part of it. Part of it's charisma. So sharks are charismatic. You know, bears are charismatic. Panda bears are charismatic. Hogs aren't really charismatic. So charisma carries an animal a long way. Seals, you know, we did that episode on seals. It's like such a charismatic animal that it can be really difficult for people to get their head around the idea of take on those. So that's a big part of it. But, and then I again, the tragedy of the commons is a big problem. Like the Keys are, you know, Key Marathon's probably like the epicenter of sport fishing in the United States. The number of boats there is staggering. The amount of fishing going on there is just truly, truly staggering. And even more than that is the impact of like anchors on coral reefs. Like that's really hard for me to, it's hard for me to even think about that, you know? And so I hate to add to that, but for me, it's like, I'm taking one shark let me back up. Jim said something to me the other day. I'm not sure where he got it from, but I hadn't heard it quite this way. He said, if you want to protect a species, make a hunting season for it. And what he means is, you see how hard it is to raise money for the protection of something because people are busy and they don't care. And it's not that they don't care, but they don't want to give their money up for it, right? So you're like, how often do you like pick up the phone when you see one of those? For just the cost of a cup of coffee, you can support a child in, you know, it's like, it doesn't really get you that often, right? But if you want to mobilize an army to protect a species, then issue some tags. And then all the hunters who want to be part of that, they're going to give their money. They're going to buy equipment that has kickbacks on it. They're going to do the roundup to the next dollar every time they buy equipment for that species. They're going to join the conservation groups around that species. And before you know it, you have lots of money to play with for the protection of that animal. So to me, the idea that the way you save a species is to make it hands off, I don't think that's actually always true.
Right.
It can be, but I don't think it's always true. And I think the other problem is when you have no take, you start to build a lot of resentment. So now you see what happens here with the fishermen in New England and how they feel about the seals.
They don't like the seals?
No, because they feel that they're competing with seals for the fishery.
Right.
And that's because there's a zero take on seals. If there was a little take on seals, I know, right? If there was a little take on seals, I think then that would like ease that tension. But because there's none, it gives them something to be pissed about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when something happens like a, you know, great whites start funneling into the Gulf of Maine and they, you know, they kill a person, it's like, well, it's because of those damn seals. And if these biologists would allow, you know, I don't like this mentality of like hands off. I just think like why not have management for every species?
Yeah.
You know, and if a species is extremely imperiled, then it makes sense. Use ESA protection and have no take while it's on the endangered species list. When it meets recovery goals,
Yep.
start to issue tags again. Because another thing, like I was telling you when I was I went down to Big Pine Key to see the key deer. So there's a subspecies of white-tailed deer in the Keys that's on the endangered species list called the key deer. And this is a white-tailed deer that it's
It's an even cuter white-tailed deer.
it's the cutest. Man, it's the cutest. It's probably, I'd say it's about the size of my dog, you know? Probably about
80 pounds, maybe?
that'd be a big one, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but they're 2.5 feet, maybe 3 feet. So I'm seeing bucks down there with full racks, and the deer's like maybe 3 feet at the shoulders, but more like probably 2.5 feet at the shoulders. Just these tiny little deer. They're on the endangered species list. When you're driving down Route 1, you know, you start seeing all these signs like endangered deer habitat, blah, blah, blah. If they issued one tag, right, like only one lucky person per year could take one of those deer, I'd put in for that tag. That money that I put in for that tag that I'm never going to get goes to the conservation. Right. So it's like a way to raise money and then public appreciation. And before you know it, because look at animals like elk, white-tailed deer, black bear. These animals have like a cult following of people are like, you just love them because you want to kill them. It's like, I actually really like them too.
Yeah.
I also want to eat one, and I also would like to hunt one. But you get this like cult following, and this appreciation develops in the population for this animal, and it becomes iconic. Like, we're not going to lose trout because people love trout too much. We're not going to lose mallards because people love mallards too much, you know. We're not going to lose turkeys because people love them too much.
Yeah.
So to me, when somebody's getting really upset, it's hard because one thing that I think we've all seen in the last few years is that you can't counter emotional arguments with logic. You can, but it's not an effective tool. So it's really hard when somebody says something super illogical to you and you go like, oh, this will be easy. I'll just straighten this out. And then it's like, oh, that's not the answer they're looking for. You need to meet an emotional answer with an emotional answer, or they feel like you're avoiding what I'm saying.
It needs to be a mix of both, I think.
Well, for intelligent communication, yes. But I'm saying like when you actually are confronted with an emotional person. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Like, so if somebody emotionally comes up to you and says, how could you kill this animal? It's like, and they're having an emotional response. If you just said, "What do you mean?" If you just get emotional back. Well, if you
what I mean. Sorry.
You say,
sorry. When you
love
apologize to somebody, it has to be emotional, right? Like when you're. Let me try to explain what I'm saying. I'm talking basically what I'm saying is when the woke people come after you, you can't give a logical response. Like, I didn't mean that. I'm not that. I meant this. Doesn't work. You have to come back with I was so wrong and I hurt so many people and I'm now looking forward to my re-education process. Then people are like, that's right. You know what I mean? So it's hard when somebody's like upset, right? Like if somebody came to me and said, hey, why would you harvest a shark? I'd be like, oh, let me explain. Mm-hmm. You know, but if somebody's like, why would you harvest a shark? It's like, oh, this is going to be a tough one. Yeah. I'd rather just avoid that conversation personally. But yeah, to me, and after speaking to biologists about it, I feel like taking a couple sharks a year will not be is not an impact, is not an impact. And I guess it's hard. This is kind of ultimately what I'm trying to say is that the real problem for sharks is unregulated subsistence fisheries and finning. Those two things, and obviously destruction of habitat and all those kind of things. That said, I'm becoming more and more aware all the time of the degree of impact that recreational fishing can have. Yeah. Unfortunately, it does. Like you were just, in that Sebago lake
fishing
derby, right? So for listeners, what's gone on there is Salmo salar Sebago, the landlocked salmon, is named after this lake. Grant lives on it. It's called Sebago. Very big lake. Very
second
deep.
Largest in Maine.
How deep is it there?
300 feet, I think.
Yeah, a little more in some places, isn't it? Does it go past 300 anywhere?
It might be 320.
Yeah. So some deep holes. And it was a very famous landlocked salmon fishery. And then there was an introduction of lake trout in order to try to create a second recreational fishery. And inadvertently what happened was they really upset the salmon fishery. And now salmon don't really naturally reproduce very well there. And so now the salmon are struggling and sort of hobbled and kept alive through the crutch mechanism of, hatchery fish, whilst the lake trout, which were introduced from New York State, have become
predators of the salmon, but also the majority of the fish in that lake.
Yeah, and particularly of the forage fish of the salmon, I think is a big problem, right? Like they eat a lot of the same smelts that are.
Oh,
like they're eating the forage fish of. So I think they're being outcompeted a little bit too. But anyway, so they do a derby there, right? Every year, where it's like kill as many lake trout as we can.
I mean, yeah, it's like whoever gets the biggest lake trout, you win an ATV or something.
Right.
But in the process, it's just like get them all.
So what they're doing is really knocking back the lake trout once a year.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were pointing out that after that derby, you couldn't catch any lake trout.
Not as many. I mean, yeah. So we were in this deep hole, doing really well, catching big lake trout, like 2 days before the derby, up until the derby, through the derby, then after. It's like you see fish down there on the fish finder, but you're not catching. Maybe you get a bite every once in a while, but it's really hard to bring them up now. Mm-hmm. It's got to be education. I mean, those fish are getting educated to the lures you're using, just seeing other fish getting yanked
out of the water.
I mean, yeah. But
not just all that disruption to their habitat in one day.
It's confusing.
Is it a one-day derby or a weekend?
Weekend, 2 days. It's a little confusing for me because in one hand, yeah, you want to knock down that population. But on the other hand, it's like this is a living animal that you're ripping out of the water. And then many people aren't even eating them, just getting left on the ice, like hundreds and hundreds of fish on the ice after the derby. Like eagles will eat them, but they can only eat so many. Yeah. It's funny. You always see eagles eating them. Then after the derby, all I saw were hawks eating them.
Oh, yeah, because the eagles are full?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, ultimately, right, then the ice melts, they go into the water. Back into the water. Yeah, they go back into the system. And if the species is non-native and disruptive to the indigenous in the water, it does make sense to do a cull on them.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave out, there's a lot of innuendo there that I'm just going to not touch. Oh, man. But ultimately, I guess what I'm saying is down in Florida, you see that the sport fishery is having an impact on the fisheries. And I want it not to, because I want to be able to, be like, it's commercial fishing. But
yeah, that's like the one place that is the recreational fishing, huh? Not the commercial fishing.
It's one of the places where there's so much emphasis too, because you've got spearos in the water.
What's that?
Spearfishing. So if you're spearfishing, right, you're looking, most of the spearos are looking for the biggest specimens of the fish. So it's like the slaying of the gods thing I was talking about in the beginning of this, where it's like, those huge grouper. You got to see the barracuda lay long caught yesterday.
Oh, she's down there?
Yeah, she's getting back today, but wow. A fish of a lifetime. I got to show you this picture. But anyway, all the big fish getting taken out by spearfishing and by sport fishing, and then, I don't know, it just...
I mean, the guide service down there is also almost like a commercial operation.
The number of guides, the number of boats. But anyway, I don't want to... I want to go down to the Keys and fish. I love going down there to fish. I feel bad participating in... And at the same time I say that, the amount of fish that are there right now, it's mind-blowing. You're like, how can there be this? How prolific the ocean is. It's incredible. But, man, you just feel like, wow, I just wish you could get a little rest, know? And I'm not saying they're not well managed. There's just so much participation. That's the thing. There's so much participation, and I love it, and I love to be part of it. Am I one of those people shooting a cannon into a flock of passenger pigeons? I'm not, right? I'm shooting a 22 into the flock of passenger pigeons. That's how I fish. That's how I hunt. I'm not out there trying to rack them up, right? But I'm still participating. So, it's like the same as when if we were going to take leek bulbs when we harvest ramps. It's like if I take a bulb, it's a lethal harvest. If you take a bulb, it's a lethal harvest. If everybody does that, then there's none left and we wipe it out. So it's like that stewardship, but me taking a stewardship attitude can't counterbalance 10,000 people who don't, right? So if it's like 1 out of every 10 of us has a real strong stewardship ethic, because I think one of the things I've seen in the world of hunting and fishing is because you buy a license and that license goes to conservation, you get this easy out of being like, I'm a conservationist.
Yeah.
But there's no real buy-in aside from your license. Like if you were like, I'm an environmentalist, you'd have to like back that up, right? Be like, okay, well, do you recycle? You know, do you upcycle? Do you, well, let's show me how you're an environmentalist. Do you brush your teeth without water? Like what makes you one? Do you flush the toilet once a day? But if you say you're a conservationist, it's like, well, I buy a hunting license. And, it's like, I think for some people it can feel like they've done their part, but they might take more than they give back.
Yeah.
And putting those sharks back, it was easy to try to be like, well, I saved 7 fish, but it's like, not really. I mean, I would have, if I hadn't gutted that fish, I'd have accidentally killed all of them.
I was just about to say, the moral of the story is check the uterus.
check your shark's uteri.
That's the one thing you can do.
That's the one thing. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if what I'm saying makes sense. It's just complicated.
Yeah, no, I think you're not making a definitive statement. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this because I want to be part of hunting and fishing existing in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of red flags on the horizon, ways that it could be massively diminished. I spoke to Dr. Carl Malcolm recently, and he was telling me about time he spent studying moon bears in China.
What's a moon bear?
It's like a Asiatic black bear, kind of. It's like a black bear. Picture an American black bear with a black lion's mane. And a big white shield on his chest that sometimes is like a crescent moon.
Whoa, that sounds cool.
It's a very cool. You know what? You ever notice how there's certain animals you see, you can just like tell they came from Asia.
Yeah.
Or animals you're like, that's an African animal. It's like this bear, it's like a black bear, but you're like, is that from Asia? You can just tell by its morphology or something. But anyway, very cool animal. And he was studying them over there at one point. And he told me that, hunting as we know it just doesn't exist there. It's not like a Chinese citizen can just go buy a hunting license and go out hunting. He's like, there's poaching, and then there's like a meat trade, and then there's like a very high level. I think like people can buy very expensive tags. Like people from other nations might go there to do a sport hunt, and there's like some kind of thing like that. But largely, like it doesn't exist like it exists here, and I don't want it to go away. And so it's that I want to participate. I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want when the passenger pigeon's gone to be like, yeah, I was one of those people who hunted them. You know what I mean?
But I hunted them with the 22.
Yeah, but I used all the meat.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
complicated stuff. But at the same time, I think if we don't have a desire for these animals, we start to lose a reason
to protect them.
Yeah, because people don't protect what they don't know about or don't know personally. Like occasionally somebody might give a little money to something they don't know about, but for the most part, you support causes you care about. And when it comes to animals and plants and things, you need to have a relationship with them, of course. That's what we're always going on about here. So my passion for sharks, and this is maybe what I would say to the person on the dock now, retrospectively, my interest in blacktip sharks has gone through the roof. That means I don't just care about eating them, but I care about their ecology. I care about their reproductive cycle now. I'm very interested in it. I care about their habitat. What are they eating? What eats them? All that stuff's starting to matter to me. I'd never even thought about blacktip sharks before this. Never. I only started thinking about getting a blacktip shark because I heard they were good to eat. Yeah. But once I encountered one and spent time with it and held it and felt that amazing texture of its skin, wow. Coarse sandpaper, like 80 grit sandpaper or something, Once I delivered its pups, it's like, man, I care about that animal now. Yeah. I'll go to bat for that animal, right?
And I do too. You're just hearing the story.
Just hearing the story, right?
Having eaten it.
Exactly. So, yeah, honestly, you fish lake trout way more than I do. The stories that I hear from you about it and the things that happen, I'm like, it makes me more invested in them too. So anyway, I think that's an important, it's not the whole story of conservation. We still obviously need, all of these other, I think we do need a lot of people who are going like, I will never hunt and fish. It's like, good, don't.
Yeah.
whatever, great, don't, like, awesome. But we need a lot of people not to, but we need the people who do it as well. It's kind of like, you need like a lot of people to be nonviolent, but you need those people who are willing to be violent to counteract aggressive violence, right?
To fight for a cause.
Right, and you need like a small contingent of people who still do that. And so it's like that. You need a small contingent of people who still hunt and fish, I think, and it's really important. So, yeah, wow.
That got deeper than I expected.
Wow, man, I
In a good way.
came back from that trip just a little mixed up about, but because the sport fishing culture down there, man, it is all about like for instance, you pick up a sport fishing magazine down there, and you think you're gonna like see all these articles on fish, and it's all about boats.
Oh, weird.
You know what I mean? That's what's really going on down there. A lot of people's homes are like, because they have routine hurricanes and things get really beat up. So people's homes are kind of like, maybe a little bit beat up, but they're boats.
Yeah.
Oof. And then it's like, you start seeing like, wow, there's this whole fashion scene around your sunglasses and your buff and your shiny shirt and all your logo stuff and your rods and your reels, and it's become this whole thing that's like kind of gets sometimes a little bit away from what's really the whole purpose of it all. So I feel weird because I like all that stuff. I think boats are cool and sunglasses are cool, and I like all that stuff. I like nice rods and reels and all that stuff, but like, man, I don't want to like lose sight of what's important, which is the relationship to the animals, and then the protection of those animals through that relationship. And so, yeah, I find it all very complicated. And as I tread into, we recently put out our episode with Susan Crockford on polar bears. And,
Have we gotten a ton of backlash on that yet?
Well, let me read you a comment, actually. Not a ton, actually, but, it jars people a little bit.
Yeah.
To talk about. I found her book, her polar bear thriller, to be such a fun read. Wow, because it was like most of the photos I see of polar bears, they're depicted to be so cute. Oh yeah, we're getting some pushback. She's not respected by the scientific community. Okay, so for instance, here's this person. This is like a private account, and they say, hopefully this won't be used by people who want to argue false facts, their opinion are as good as facts, so they can hunt polar bears until they're all gone, when they can easily get meat and fat and butter from grass-fed cattle, buffalo, and ducks, or feral animals that are plentiful, just like humans on Easter Island cut down the last tree, thus trapping themselves to starve on the island because they couldn't make boats to fish or escape. And just like humans right now are illegally rushing to kill the last sturgeon or rhinos or elephants because the products so derived are becoming unbelievably lucrative as the animals come closer to extinction. It's kind of like a rambling comment.
Yeah, it's like, yes, I agree with what you're saying to an extent, but you're not, that's not what people are trying to do. They're not trying to kill the last polar bear.
Here's my response. Polar bears are a highly protected species. The only hunt available is in Nunavut with indigenous folks on their extremely expensive subsistence tags. The number of tags they receive is limited and fixed and set by biologists, and if they sell one, it means they can't use it themselves. The bears harvested this way are either going to be hunted by the person who buys the tag and goes with the required Inuit guide, or by those Inuit themselves. Polar bears are not threatened with extinction, not even close. Trying to protect them further with fake science is unethical and unnecessary. It's not fair to compare legal science-based subsistence hunts with Africa's black market poaching and bushmeat trade, especially since it's legal hunting in reality that's paying for so much of elephant and rhino conservation and to combat the poaching you mentioned. The comparison of hunters to poachers is like comparing local organic farmers to someone who's running a huge toxic Monsanto monocrop. Both are farmers, but they're really different kinds.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, to me, they're trying to conflate it all. Like, that's what I hate about the shark thing. The idea that you taking a shark, where biologists have said that legal take is 1 shark per day per boat, you can take 1 a day based on the numbers in the area where you're fishing. And people want to conflate you killing one of those sharks with shark thinners.
Yeah.
Or with overexploitation of reefs, like you're doing that, when it's like, that's like saying that our friend over there at Patch Farm, our little organic local farm, is the same as a Monsanto farm.
Right.
It's like, because they're both farmers. It's like, because I fish and they fish, we're the same. It's like, no, it's more complicated and nuanced than that. But yeah, anyway, I expect this conversation to continue to unfold over the years as we do this podcast, because I'm like on my own quest to sort of sort out how I feel about it at all. I feel about it all, but the narrative keeps changing too. And you never know what animal's going to next come up as the charismatic animal poster child for, for environmentalism, which I get, but what bothers me is when people lie. It's like the polar bear thing where people like are willing to lie about polar bears. So to me, the whole thing of it's the ends are important, but if you have to lie to get to those ends, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, Kendall and I my girlfriend and I got into that a little bit last night because she listened to that polar bear episode, and it was like, is it okay to lie for the better? And we ultimately got down to like, no, because then people are never going to believe you when you're telling the truth.
You remember when Fauci lied about the masks, right?
Yeah.
So he lies and says the masks won't help because he's supposedly worried that people will buy up all the masks and that they won't be available for professionals. Totally understand. But once he lied, he discredited himself. And now the media is doing all this cleanup, being like, well, these anti-maskers. It's like, well, you guys create that problem when you do a coordinated national level lie.
Just say, please.
Yeah.
Don't.
Assume people are more intelligent. How about, please make fabric masks. Don't use N95s. We need them for our healthcare providers. If they had said that, the number of masks that people would have made
companies
for themselves
making masks
and then turned in for the use of, it's just like lying to it created a credibility problem. And then they act like if you don't believe this person, you're crazy. And it's like, how do you know if this story he's telling is true now?
If they had told the truth and requested that of the public, the economy would have been stimulated. All those companies that make clothing, and that ultimately it happened in the end.
It did happen, yeah.
Everybody started making masks. It's just...
They could have started making those masks right away during that initial lockdown when people didn't know what to do with themselves.
Right.
They'd have been like, get out your sewing machine. Anyway, the point is, like, when you lie, you get discredited, and then you can't be surprised when people don't listen. And so on this polar bear thing, what I'm noticing is polar bears are cute. They're stunning, right? They're so beautiful. But they never show you pictures of them like peeling the hide back on a seal and, eating all its blubber. Like, they rarely want you to see the pictures of when I say they, I mean environmental groups, don't want you to see their face like covered in blood. Like a white bear eating an animal is a pretty messy ordeal.
Beautiful.
Yeah. If you like that kind of thing, it's beautiful. But, you don't see that. You see them drinking Coca-Cola. You see them all snuggling with each other, and a narrative is built that, like, if you ran into one, you could just snuggle them. So I enjoyed her novel because it kind of showed the other side of it. But anyway, this stuff's all really complicated, I'm just grateful that I get to participate at some level. Thanks for sitting down with me and hearing the story. Was it worth the wait?
Yeah, it was worth the wait. And this conversation went into a direction I didn't expect it to, which is...
the complexities of fisheries.
Very complex.
It is, man. And it's not like you can just regulate the sea the way you can regulate land, because most of the sea is international. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that people in future generations will, in the same way that I look back in the past and go, wow, like, if as a person who likes to hunt, fish, and forage, there was a lot more opportunity in many ways in the past. And I'll look nostalgically back. I love thinking about 10,000 years ago when there was woolly mammoths and woolly rhinos and, giant sloths and cave bears. And, you even looking back into recent history when there were passenger pigeons and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, oh man, so much has been lost. But I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to look back on this time and be like, wow, those were the good old days.
Yeah.
Even though that, like, we've lost so much, even though there's so little biodiversity, our freedom to hunt and fish right now is kind of outrageous. And as your buddy once said to me, we're addicted to freedom. So as somebody who's pretty addicted to freedom, I worry about, will future generations get to do this? And maybe they, I'm going to work very hard, like so many other people, to try to do what I can to make sure that it's still there.
Yeah.
But if it's not, I guess I'm just feeling really grateful that I get to do it now. Not because I get to kill things, and not just because I get to eat things, but because I get to know these animals in a more meaningful way than I would if I just got to see them through binoculars or on like an eco tour.
Yeah.
You know,
but if this was really just about eating things, then you would just go to the supermarket and be like, this is, like people do that. They get really excited. Like, oh, nice. I got this chicken. I'm going to break it down. And
God, I never get excited about that. I feel guilty about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, but if you go to the farmer's market and get a chicken that was raised in someone's backyard, I mean, that feels good.
Yeah, it does, but it doesn't feel as good.
No, I'm just saying that shows you that it's not just about the meat. It's not.
You know what's complicated about it though is like when we killed your chickens, it wasn't fun.
Right.
It wasn't not fun. It was just like it's work, and you feel a little bit bad about the killing.
Yeah.
Kind of bad. When you're fishing, it's actually fun. And so the problem with fishing for me, and it's different with land, like once I get my deer, I'm done. Right? Yeah. It's like move on. But when you're fishing and you get what you want, it's so fun, you want to keep fishing. You know what I mean? It's hard to shut it off.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the things about like going to a market or even going to a farm and raising your own animal. It's not fun in the way that fishing is fun.
It's work raising the animal, and then like, okay, hey, Daniel, you want to come over, help me butcher my chickens? Yeah, this will be fun. It's like we're hanging out. It's like, okay, it's like we're hanging out, maybe drinking a beer, like killing chickens and plucking them and stuff. That was
not as fun as turkey hunting.
Maybe it was a fun experience, but it's not going out into a wild animals environment, learning about the environment, learning about their behavior, and like seeing what they do, how they react to certain things.
Yeah, and really being like, I know how to feed myself.
Yeah.
Like I could live like this if I had to. Like
it's not like, all I need to do is go to Paris Farmers Union.
Get some chicks.
Get that piece of paper, fill out.
As long as I get enough grain. Yeah, wow. Well, thanks for sitting down and hearing the story, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was great.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.